Today, Grade.com talks with Gisela Boucher, who is the CEO of Loaves Fishes Family Kitchen. If you've not heard of them, they are an organization that provides hot and nutritious prepared meals to feed hungry families, children, seniors, disabled individuals in the Bay Area. If you're new here to the podcast, please press subscribe on your YouTube and your podcast app, because today we are going to learn how food is the great leveler and some of the impressive tactics that an organization that's been around for more than 30 years is doing to play their part in this holistic approach to a very real problem. Ms. Gisela, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I want to learn more about what you're doing with the organization and the moving pieces. I really enjoyed the deep dive on the website. Particularly, those that have listened to previous episodes that I've recorded will know, in my 9 to 5, I do lots of traveling, and I'm in San Francisco. I do lots of business with Amazon, which they have a huge presence in San Francisco. I'm there all the time. And so specifically your niche in this, helping the hungry, helping the homeless, I've been able to see this in flight for, I've been with my company about 6-ish years. So really excited to learn more about just sort of what you've seen and boots on ground experience. But before we do any of that, the Loaves and Fishes Family Kitchen, that is a very memorable, very interesting name. And I wanted to see if maybe we could start there. And if you had any background on just how this came about, do you maybe a little history lesson?
Absolutely. So first, I'll give you a little bit of a background on our organization. So this is our 41st year. We actually started in 1980, serving 15 adults and 11 children. And that first meal has now morphed into an organization that, as of June 30th of this year, served 1,521,506 or thereabouts meals but who's counting? But I'll also share with you why that's significant for us. Prior to COVID, we were on track. We had served 537,000 meals, which for us was a high point. We had hybridized ourselves maybe 6 years ago. Up to that point, we were a classic food soup kitchen. We would prepare all the meals, we would serve them from our meal service sites. And as a result, we were serving about 110,000 meals a year, which was significant for a small organization like ours. But about 6 years ago, we realized, as we saw the numbers continuing to tick up quite significantly in our community, and we serve Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, and actually up into South San Francisco. We decided what we needed to do is we needed to do something a little bit different. So what we did is we started developing partnerships with nonprofit organizations, community locations, all throughout these 2 counties, to actually bring the meals to those organizations and to those locations, because so many of the folks who are hungry, who are homeless, aren't able to get to our 2 meal service sites. We went in 1 year from 110,000 to 362,000 meals that first year after we made that change. So that was our first, we call it Soup Kitchen 2.0. We then did Soup Kitchen 3.0 about 2 years prior to COVID. And that was with the integration of a la carte. It's a food recovery program. We use a food truck model, only model program of its kind in the country. Because for us, again, food is the great leveler. We all need it. We all have to find ways to make sure that we are nourished so that we can be, operating at maximum efficiency and productivity. And when school, that you're succeeding academically. And one of the things that everybody enjoys is food trucks. So we decided to take that model, but we did it with a little bit of a twist. All of the food that we serve through our a la carte program is recovered food. So we developed partnerships with companies like Facebook, Flagship Culinary Services, Stanford University, San Jose International Airport. And all of the meals that are prepared but never put out on the food service line, because we can't take that because we don't know how they've been held to temperature, but anything that's been prepared but not put out on the food service line, rather than have it go into composting and into the landfills, we take it, we redirect it, and we serve it out in the community to the folks who need it the most. And in the last 2 years of that, we have been able to put out an additional 600,000 meals, and have about, I think we just hit 1 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions that we've been able to eliminate as a result of that program. So we tried that with Soup Kitchen 3.0. So then COVID struck. And our 537,000 meals that we thought was quite an accomplishment for us up to that point went right out the window within the first 3 weeks of the lockdown. We knew very quickly that we were going to have to do something different. We were going to have to completely rework how we deliver our services with the COVID-19 protocols and all of the extra food safety and sanitizing and masking and social distancing, how we would deliver those meals. And as a result, we started forecasting that we were probably going to see maybe 800,000 meals by the end of that fiscal year. Well, we were wrong. Let me correct that. I was wrong. We ended up serving over 1 million meals that year. And then we thought, forecasting again, we'll probably see 1.2, 1.3 million meals. Wrong again. We ended up with over 1.5 million meals this last fiscal year.
Wow.
So that's been our trajectory. And if you want to talk about a hockey stick, it's a hockey stick and a half for us. It's just been really, quite a skyrocket for us. And the problem that we're facing is that these numbers are our new normal. While some of our colleagues, thank goodness, are starting to see some of their numbers level off and even go down a little bit, our numbers continue to grow. We're now at over 150,000 meals a month. And we're pretty close to knocking on the door of 10,000 meals a day that we're providing out in our communities. So COVID's not done with us. And now we've got the Delta variant. Now we've got the Lambda variant. We're going back into mask mandates here in California. So we stayed with all of the protocols all the way through as they were trying to open and close and open and close and open and close. We just stayed with the protocols and said, you know what, we're not going to change until we have a really clear sense that we're going to be able to get beyond the impact of COVID. And we're just not going to see that happen for any time soon. The folks who are with us now, our guests, they're going to be with us, unfortunately, for many, many years to come, because those jobs that they had where they were struck, many of the people that we served had jobs. They were working, they were cobbling together 2 or 3 jobs, and it was a struggle, but they were still able to get, food on the table and still pay the rent or still buy clothes for the kids and still take care of the prescriptions. But when COVID hit, their jobs were the first ones that went away. And so those kids,
I'm sorry to interrupt. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. And first, let me say I love the word that comes to mind is innovative. I love the innovative approach that you and that the organization has taken, this food truck repurposed approach. It's such a fantastic model. And I could rattle off a dozen reasons, from the food side, from just putting food in bellies. And there's just so much good that comes out of that. Also, some of the numbers that you rattled off, 1.5 million meals in a year. That is insane. And I know on your website, all over the place, it says the number seems big, but it's minuscule compared to the problem that we're fighting, right? Like, we still have so much room to grow. You were about to talk about, and I interrupted you.
That's quite all right.
My next question I mentioned I've spent lots of time on the West Coast, all up and down the West Coast, lots of time in San Fran and the Bay Area. And you have a very interesting mixture in that area of the tech and the cloud and the startup community, which is booming, right? For lack of a term, very wealthy. It's definitely not the class that we're talking about. And on the other hand, if you visit the Tenderloin area or other areas of the Bay Area, it is it gets very interesting, right? You definitely don't want to be out late at night. So my question is, like, how do we get to this point? And I know that is a very
Yeah.
tough question to answer, and each case is probably unique, and we could go boots on ground and hear lots of amazing stories. But this number seems to be doubling for you year over year.
Yes.
How is this happening?
Well, we call it the Silicon Valley paradox, that in an area of incredible abundance and wealth, butted right up next to it is an entire community that's struggling day in and day out just to make ends meet. Here's what a lot of people don't realize. There are still a lot of stereotypes around who are the hungry and who are the homeless in our community. In our area, in Silicon Valley, the majority of the folks who are homeless all have Section 8 vouchers. They qualify for affordable housing, but the problem is there's no affordable housing to be had, because there are roughly 15,000 units of affordable housing that has already been approved, but they haven't broken ground to build anything. And it takes a minimum of 3 to 5 years to build those units and those complexes. And so we're sitting there going, well, in the meantime, guess what? People are still hungry.
Right.
And people are still homeless, and they're still struggling, and they're still living in their cars or in their RVs, still trying to cobble together some sort of a life, while circumstances around them change to the point where they might be able to break out of that cycle of homelessness. And that's not the only thing that, of course, impacts folks who are struggling in this area. You have the issue of veteran homelessness. While we've made a lot of great strides in Silicon Valley to end veteran homelessness, when COVID hit, that just totally upended everything. And the numbers and the gains that we made just completely evaporated. And it's the same thing that we're struggling with when we talk about the fact that the majority of the folks that we've served, our numbers have tripled in the last 18 months, tripled. And the majority of those, believe it or not, families with children and seniors. So 1 out of 3 of the people that we serve are children. And so these are kids who, food is fuel.
Yeah.
So if we can't make sure that these kids get at least that one meal a day that we can provide, they don't have what they need in order to succeed in school. They don't have what they need in order to make progress, if they're having any health issues, which is why for us, it's so important that every meal that we prepare has, our goal is to always have 100% of their nutritional daily requirements that day, because we know that we only have one shot at it, that one meal a day. So we need to pack it with as much nutritional punch as possible. And not just for the kids, but for the adults too, who are still trying to cobble things together, because about 40% of the people that we serve have a job. Many of them have 2 or 3 jobs. And yet it's still not enough in one of the most expensive areas in the country to live to be able to cover all of their expenses. So it's that paradox that you have this abundance and then you have this poverty just butted up against each other. But don't be fooled. It was there well before COVID. It was there well before Silicon Valley even became Silicon Valley. It's just much more visible now because the numbers are so large that there's no not noticing how prevalent it is across all of the Bay Area, not just down here in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties.
Yeah, and you may have given me this number, so I apologize if I missed it, but do we have a number, a ballpark number of how many hungry or homeless are in maybe your area or San Francisco, just whatever you have? Like, is there, we talked about your impact. Do we have an idea of scale of the problem?
So pre-COVID, on any given night in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, there were anywhere between 11 and 13,000 people who were actually sleeping on the streets. That the shelters are full. There's no other accommodation for them. They don't have a car to sleep in. They don't have an RV. They can't couch surf. They're on the streets. As of December of last year, that number had jumped to 40,000.
Wow.
And so that's just the visible on the streets number. Now, then you have the number of what we call the hidden homeless. I'm sorry, and the hidden hungry. And those are the folks who are living in their cars, living in RVs, they're couch surfing. They're going from place to place because, there might be a limitation on the amount of time they can be at a particular shelter, and then they have to go to another one. Prior to COVID, that number between the two counties was about 850,000 people. That number is well over 1 million, close to 1.2 million now.
Wow.
Just in those two communities. So, and these are folks who many are working, are struggling, are trying to cobble things together, and yet it's just not enough.
That is a crazy, crazy number. That is a crazy number. Do you, I want to talk a little bit more about the programs that you're running. As you run these programs, do you follow the people that get food? That's not the real question. The real question that I want to know is, do you see a ripple effect? Like, I think if we look at the problems that someone that is hungry, someone that is homeless, even these hidden hungry folks are facing, they have jobs, they have families, they have children. I think in order of importance, it's probably like a roof over their head, and the very next thing, if not flipped around, food in their belly, a warm meal in their stomach allows you cognitively to think clearer. You can go to work, you're able to take care of your children can learn, they're able to grow. There's all of these. I'm curious if by hitting one of these priorities, what I feel could be a root of one of these problems, do you see a ripple in the reward system, or in how is there improvement, right? Like, does this question make sense?
It does. It does. And, because the problem really is complex. If it were just one single thing that contributed to, a person or a family to find themselves on the streets or in a shelter or coming to one of our meal service locations, of which we are now up to 105 between the two counties. We went from our own 2 meal service sites now to 105 locations. I would argue, and this is said with complete bias intended, because you can put a roof over somebody's head, but if they don't have any food, what's the point?
Right.
This is the one thing that we know we can literally pick off of people's plate, so that they can then focus on trying to get housing, trying to find employment, trying to retain their employment by working and being productive, so having the kids be successful academically because they've got food in their tummies, they've got fuel to work from, right?
Yeah.
So for us, you never want it to be an either or proposition, but if you have to kind of rank it, for me, it really has to be, we have to make sure that people are fed. And that's a basic human right. This isn't a luxury. Food is not a luxury. For many, housing is a luxury. They may find alternative ways to, shelter themselves in the meantime. But if you have no access to food, to healthy, nutritious food, there's no in the meantime for you on that score. So I would argue that, while they might run a close first and second, I would say, if we can crack the nut around making sure that everyone has access to healthy, nutritious food, regardless of their circumstances, then we can make some headway in some of the other issues that may be impacting people's circumstances. It may be mental health, it may be unemployment or underemployment, because many of the folks, as I said, work multiple jobs, right? So it's not as simple as saying, well, if we do one, that just everything else just cascades out of the way. If we take care of the one, which is making sure people are fed, that means we can redirect all of our attention on those other issues and then start knocking them off.
Yeah.
One after the other.
I pulled this from your website, and this is exactly what we're talking about. By combating food insecurity in the Bay Area and increasing hunger relief, we enable individuals to use their limited financial resources to pay for other basic needs like rent, utilities, transportation, healthcare. This is talking about financial resources, but we could go so much deper than that. The mental capacity and bandwidth and all this. So I love that idea. And I think that hits home for lots of folks. Let's you talked a little bit about the programs in the very top of this, and you gave kind of a summary of the many ways that you're able to capture food and how you distribute it. I'm going to ask that you maybe just do a quick rebrief here. In what ways are we aggregating all this food? Because at one point, when we were just Loaves and Fishes, and there was 15 adults and 11 children, or whatever you said, we were cooking that in a kitchen yourself,
in a kitchen,
right? In a homegrown kitchen. Today,
right.
That's not the case. So, just real quick, how are we getting that, and how are we distributing it to these folks in need?
Sure. Thanks for asking that question. So we, in addition to our a la carte program, which is the food recovery,
right?
We have a commercial kitchen in Morgan Hill, California, which is about 20 miles south of downtown San Jose, where our business office is located. And it's actually in a senior complex, a low-income senior complex, and they lease the kitchen to us for $1 a year. So we're able to then utilize their facilities and, of course, feed everybody in their complex as part of the agreement.
Sure.
We then load all of those prepared meals onto temperature-controlled trucks that we then use to take to the various locations throughout San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, where then the meals are distributed at those locations by volunteers, by some of our staff. It's usually a combination of a staff person, and then we have a group of volunteers who help us, distribute the meals. The same thing with our a la carte program. All of those meals are picked up in food trucks that are temperature controlled, so that we're able to make food safety is paramount for us, because knock on wood, it's been 41 years and no one's ever gotten sick on any of our food. So we're very proud of that. And, that's very important to us to make sure that continues.
Sure.
So everything is kept to temperature, and it's distributed out using our trucks, and our driver ambassadors either deliver it for distribution by a particular organization that we're bringing the meals to, or to our own meal service sites, where we then deliver the meals in partnership with our volunteers. So, but in addition to those hot meals that we prepare every morning starting at 4 a.m. And picking up the meals that we redistribute from partners like Facebook and Flagship. We also we have a brown bag lunch program where we have groups of volunteers, and we have had several groups of volunteers all through COVID who committed to stay within their own grouping and prepare bag lunches using all the COVID-19 safety protocols. So it would contain a sandwich, 2 snacks, something to drink, and fruit whenever we get that donated. So in addition to the 1.5 hot and prepared meals that we distribute, we also did an additional 50,000 bag lunches and an additional 48,000 hygiene kits that our volunteers would put together, because when you are homeless and you're carrying everything that you own on your back, at least we can make sure you have something that can help you stay somewhat healthy in that way as well.
Yeah.
So we also got into the grocery business, completely inadvertent, because it's not our wheelhouse, but we also found that we were getting lots of donations of uncooked, shelf-stable food. And so for those folks who did still have access to being able to cook or reheat food, we were able to bring out fresh produce, fresh fruit, as I said, shelf-stable food, canned goods, things like that. We would distribute it at the same time as we were doing the hot and prepared meals. So we ended up doing 1.2 million pounds of those types of foods as well. And we're going to continue as long as it's necessary. But our bailiwick is really around hot and prepared meals, because we found that.
But as I look at your website,
it
is impressive.
Keeps morphing. It keeps morphing.
It's so impressive. You're operating like a San Francisco, like a Bay Area startup.
Yes.
But in a nonprofit, charitable way. It's so interesting. I've done dozens of these interviews. I don't think I've had anybody as innovative. It's very fun.
Thank you. The blessing really has been the support that we've gotten, both from, our individual donors who have all stepped up, foundations who literally said, we know what you're doing, and this is a crisis. We're just giving this to you, COVID-19 money on top of what we've already committed to you, because we know how stretched things are. Companies like Facebook and Flagship, when their companies completely shut down and they were not preparing any meals, and they were not, utilizing any of their of their uncooked food. They did two things. One is they gave us all of their uncooked food.
Wow.
For us to be able to use in the kitchen in Morgan Hill to prepare hot meals so that we could backfill for a la carte, because those prepared meals totally went away. It went down from 600,000 meals to zero. So they not only gave us that, but then in addition, the money that they would have spent on food to feed their employees, they hired restaurants to prepare meals for us so that they could help the restaurants continue to keep their employees working, who would then give us the meals for us to distribute out in the community.
That's insane.
So everybody was just trying to find unique ways and innovative ways to help keep our ability to get meals out to the folks who need it most. Really, the most vulnerable among us. They found ways to help continue to support that.
Yeah, and I didn't write this down, and now I wish I would have, but I remember reading something on your website about you said something like, or someone from the marketing team said something about, we're playing our individual role in this holistic approach to a bigger problem. This is exactly what you're talking about. I mean,
that's
you're
exactly
talking your
right.
weight, but Facebook and Flagship and all these other companies are putting money and hiring restaurants and giving you food. And there's this huge ecosystem at work. It's really fascinating to see.
And the blessing is that there's, if COVID has done anything good for us, and God forbid there's not much that COVID has done that's good for us. But one of the things that it did do is it really has shined a light on just how precarious things are for people in our communities, and not just our communities. This is something that's going on across the country, that so many folks are one catastrophe, one medical issue, one job loss, one mental health break, one, you fill in the blank, away from finding themselves unhoused or unable to feed their families, and the donors and the partners, they get it. And they realize that this is our new normal. Yeah. Unfortunately, these numbers, 10,000, 7,000, 10,000 meals a day, this is our new normal. Yeah. And it's going to be with us for years to come. And they realize that we're not going to go back to the days. I was saying the other day, who would have thought I would pine for the days when before COVID, we were doing 2,500 meals a day.
Yeah.
I pine for those, because that tells me that the numbers aren't what they are now, which is 7,500 meals a day of hot and prepared meals. Yeah. And that doesn't include all of the other things that we do to try and backfill.
We've spent a little bit of time talking about the problem. We've talked about your approach. We've talked lots about the innovation. I wanted to maybe sort of start to wrap up with this question of like, over the next couple of years, where are you headed? And this answer could be, we're just going to pour gas on the three plays that I've laid out in front of you. The sort of the farm, the food trucks, maybe it's just, we're going to continue to try to expand there. Are there any other plays that you have on the roadmap, or is there anything else worth sharing, sort of future plans?
Right. Well, we did something that a lot of folks thought was a little nuts, but we knew we had to do it, especially as we saw the numbers continue to grow. So in the middle of COVID, we bought a building. Okay. Because for 40 years, we were nomads. We cooked wherever we could get our hands on a kitchen. We, and so we were constantly moving, trying to have those locations. And so we're in the middle of a campaign that's just getting started in order to build a more centralized kitchen that will allow us to cast our net more widely and more efficiently, because as much as we love our kitchen down in Morgan Hill, it puts an additional 3 hours of time on the road for our drivers, constantly having to go back and forth to get more meals to take out to the community. And just to give you kind of a sense, where Morgan Hill is, and we deliver meals all the way up to South San Francisco, is about 70 miles.
Yeah, and San Francisco miles is
and San Francisco miles of stop start. Everything's under construction, so it's tough. So that's one of the things we're doing. We know that by building this new kitchen, which will be much larger than the one we have now, where we're really pretty much maxed out, it will allow us to not only continue to provide more meals, but it's also going to be able to allow us to be a culinary institute. So we will be able to actually help train folks in hospitality services, particularly in working in restaurants, and to help break that cycle on the unemployment or underemployment side as well.
Wow.
And to help people get, out, help get out of that circumstance that's also, impeding their progress, and finding a more stable situation for themselves. So it will allow us to do that as well. It will allow us to create opportunities for other organizations that provide services, whether it's mental health services or job employment placement services, or working with kids, have a place where they can bring the services to that location, so that while we're feeding folks, we have an opportunity for them to be able to avail of these other support activities as well. So we're trying to do that as well. But we know that we have to just continue to grow what we're doing, continue to refine, especially on the a la carte side, because food recovery is really going to be a place where we can make some very significant inroads. I mean, we're barely scratching the surface, and we're hoping that other partner organizations will join the Facebooks and the flagships in providing us with their additional, unused meals, so that we can get that out to the folks who need it the most. So it's doing more of the same, and yet also finding new ways to be more efficient, more timely, more directed, and environmental.
Yeah, I would definitely keep my ear to the ground, my eyes on you guys. I'm looking forward. I figured there's going to be a couple more sort of cards to play. I'm looking forward to seeing those.
Absolutely.
This is a really good segue. And how I want to sort of close this is, you talked about, obviously, if there are other organizations there in the area that run similar programs that are providing meals for their employees, there are going to be leftovers. And this is a great way to the food that's not hitting the stand, or that's not being put in front of folks. This is a great outlet for those. So that's one way to be involved.
Absolutely.
The question I want to ask you is, how can people help? You're going to be talking to locals. You're going to be talking to people. I mean, I interview people all around the world. So you'll have people that aren't even in the US. For the sort of vast majority of folks, what's the best way to be involved?
Well, I'd say two things. The first is for the folks who are in our area, who are in the Bay Area. We would be delighted to come and tell you our story and find ways for you to connect with us, whether that's in providing us food, helping underwrite the cost of another temperature controlled truck, coming to volunteer at our meal service sites, or at one of our bag lunch assemblies. There's lots of ways to get connected with us. We have them all posted on our website. But for the folks who are not in our area, whether the issue is food, or if it's some other issue, if it's a cause that you care about, don't let COVID stop you from getting engaged in a cause you care about, because now is the time more than ever that we need those hands and hearts of our volunteers. At the lockdown, we went from 5,000 volunteers to 0. And it wasn't until our volunteers started seeing that we were creating safe spaces for them that they would come back and volunteer with us. So our numbers have just ticked up enormously, and we're grateful for that. Understand that we're not the only ones doing that. So if there's a cause you care about, check out the organizations in your community and get connected, and find a way that you can help. Maybe you can be doing something at home that you can then bring to them to help support their services. But find that thing that touches your heart, that speaks to your soul. If we all do our piece, whatever that is, we're all going to be raised up. We'll all be lifted up together. And it's that old saying about a rising tide lifts all boats. We will all be raised up, because as a culture, as a country, as a community, as a world, we will be judged by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. So this is our opportunity to get it right.
Yeah. Excuse me, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I told you coming in, this was going to sit in a special spot, because I talk to people all over the globe, and sometimes I get to talk to I mean, everybody's doing something important, but there are times I cross paths with the movement where it feels like it's a little closer to home, right? And I'm always in this area. I'm able to see sort of the battle that you're fighting, and to hear the plays that you've ran. And again, just to repeat this word of this innovation that you've implemented, the pivots that you've run, it is truly impressive. I really appreciate you giving me a few minutes and just allowing me to explore this. It was a blast.
I appreciate that so much. And I do hope the next time you're out on our side of the coast that you'll come down and visit with us. We would love to chat with you and take you on a tour and see what we're up to.
I will definitely take you up on that. Yeah, I appreciate
Thanks
the
so
offer.
much.
Yeah. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, if you enjoyed this, please press subscribe on your YouTube or podcast app. That will show the algorithm this is an important conversation, so more people can learn about the importance of combating food insecurity and understanding that when one of us is affected, that we are all affected.